Excusez-moi, mon français c'est très petit. No. So I have to speak in English. No. And, but in English, not in American. Okay. I want to make a remark regarding my question to Sam. In Peru, we have until between the 20s and the 60s, we have many attempts at making land reform and agrarian reform, because land was in the hands of very few people, and it didn't work. Simply didn't work. There was always a way in which the very powerful and rich people managed to avoid land reform. In 1968, we have a socialist military regime implanted, and in 2 years they dissolved all kind of agrarian property, a real agrarian revolution. In Peru, it was 100% done. I mean, not even the smallest of all properties in the most obscure town in the highlands of Peru was saved. Everybody, I mean, all of the land owners, all of the terratenientes, as we call them, lost their property. And for the following 40 years, it was disaster. It was chaos, absolute chaos. People, the peasants that received the land didn't know what to do, and so anything worked. 40 years after the reform, finally a new kind of land ownership and economic development of land is developing in Peru, with very competent small-sized, medium-sized land holdings, basically devoted to production of cash crops like avocado and paprika and many different things. Of course, in the hands of very rich people again. But the efficiency has changed. Before the reform in the 60s, the only thing that Peru really produced in the land was sugar. That is a very lazy crop to develop, because you put it once and then you harvest it 6 times. No? So it didn't work. I mean, it was not producing the wealth that it could produce and is producing now. So now Peru is exporting avocados and tomatoes and potatoes and all sorts of things because of that change that happened then. And I think that is a good, interesting complement to what Sam just said. If you want change, chaos has to be involved. There has to be a period of chaos and real revolution before you can manage to make societal change. And what we see in this transition between the Moche and the Lambayeque is basically that period of chaos. No? And of course, I think that what Sam said should be remarked. Thanks God we don't have text. Because if we had text, that text would tell the story of the powerful and the rich. And it would not tell the story of what really happened. No? And I think that many times archaeologists see historical texts, historical sources as being so narrative and powerful, but actually it is, as Gideon said, the small things forgotten, the ones that actually tell you the story as it should be. Okay, but my talk is not about that. My talk is about drones. Okay. Drones in archaeology. There are good drones and there are bad drones. No? We are seeing the bad drones working in the Near East now, today, killing people with no remorse, with no human involvement. But there are also good drones doing good things. Good things for science, good things for security, for the environment. To bring, in my country that has such a rugged terrain, to bring medicine into towns that are absolutely out of the way. I mean, there are many things that are happening, and I hope that we can focus on the good side of drones. The second problem we have in Peru is that we have too much archaeology, too much cultural patrimony. And when I say too much, I mean that we have more than 100,000 archaeological sites in Peru. I mean, kind of like France, where you ever dig a hole, some gold, Roman, and whatever comes out of the ground. In Peru, it's exactly like that. The problem is that while you know most of those archaeological resources, we don't know where they are. We only know the biggest ones. But every once in a while, we find new stuff, Huacas everywhere. So what do we do? What can we do about it? To give you an idea, this valley here, it's a little valley in the coast of Peru, the valley of Casma, and all the red and blue polygons are sites, huge sites, humongous sites, like Chanquillo, no? Or this place, Mojeque, Huaca de los Reyes, or Las Aldas, a site that is 4,000 years BC, no? Humongously large, monumental sites that developed in that part of the world very, very early on. No? So we have to find them if we want to protect them. We want to see how they are, where they are, what the status is, what can we do about them. We need real information about them, you see. But in Peru, if you search in Google for Machu Picchu, you will find a lot of pictures taken by tourists, but not real information. Not really real information about what we need to know. The state of the sites, the status of conservation of sites, no? Information about different archaeological excavations that have been produced in the sites, many different things that are simply lacking. See? And actually, that is not only a case of Peru, because when I have searched for information of that kind, almost anywhere in the world, we simply don't have it. I mean, you have pictures of naked tourists running around in Machu Picchu, but you never get, the real information that we want to find, you see? And that is a shortcoming of archaeology anywhere. No, we don't have that kind of information. And the reason is among other things, is that it's hard to get, you see? So this is, for instance, huacas in the coast of Peru that have been plundered lately by agricultural developments. And we cannot do anything about this because we don't have a picture of how these places were before the plundering happened. No? And if we cannot show a judge or the police even how things were before and how they are now, we simply cannot proceed in any way to defend these type of sites. So this kind of information is not only a matter of interest for students, researchers, school children, but actually for the real protection of the cultural heritage, the built cultural heritage all around the world. Okay, so what we can do is we can go ahead and start producing information about these sites in the traditional way that is very, very slow. Or we can use new technologies to do that in a much faster way. And that's where the drones come in. You see, it's simply a matter of how fast and how accurate we can produce information. No? This site here is a beautiful site in the highlands of northern Peru called Cuelap. A couple of years ago, there was a big rain one day, and half of this side of the wall came down. Simply disappeared. Collapsed, and now it has to be rebuilt. The problem is that we don't have real information of how the wall was before it collapsed. So we will have to produce that kind of information. One of my goals in my lab in the Catholic University in Peru is to try to develop something that I'm calling the National Archive, Digital Archive of Cultural Patrimony in Peru. So historical and archaeological, and actually produce these type of booklets with information we get from each site that includes all the kind of information that we get from drones, like orthophotos and three-dimensional models and digital topographies and surface models, and terrain models, etc., etc., etc. We can actually, this year we have very bad fires around archaeological sites in Peru and in Chile, and these fires are clearly a problem. And we could actually protect the sites much better if we use this type of technology. Multispectral cameras, for instance, are excellent to address if a site is threatened by the vegetation that is around or inside the sites. So this is the kind of stuff that we can do. See? So this is what I'm trying to produce. And because we started working on this, I ended up doing some research in Nasca, around the Nasca lines. Who doesn't want to work in Nasca? It's really hot, to tell you the truth. It's really warm most of the year. But it has some things that are unbelievable. This is not my field. I work in conjunction with a Peruvian archaeologist called Johnny Isla, that is a local expert, that is the local guardian of the Pampas de Nasca, where all of this is happening. And I work with him in many different things, but basically trying to develop a protocol of how to use drones to detect and protect the Nasca lines and the Palpa figures that we will see now. Okay? So, the Nasca lines. everybody has seen this picture. I was Vice Minister of Culture in Peru when ¿cómo se llama? Earthwatch? No,
No, Greenpeace.
Greenpeace, no, put a sign next to this figure, no, and actually managed to destroy part of the sign by doing that. No? So even people that have good intentions can be bad for our cultural heritage. No? These are the less known figures that we find in that same region. No? While the Nazca lines are enormous, humongously large, this one is more than 600 meters from one side to the other. No? These are much smaller, 10 meters, 5 meters. While these are in a flat area that clearly you cannot see from anywhere, because even if you go to the top mountain, the nearest mountain, you won't be able to see it. So the question is, how do you actually enjoy the picture, because nobody could have seen it. These are the slopes of the mountains. While the famous Nazca lines are basically a representation of geometrical figures, lines and trapezoids and spirals, the Palpa figures, because they are next to a town called Palpa, are humans, the renditions of humans. All people with a cane and humans with their animals, people wearing very exotic headdresses in their heads, that are small, on a place where you could clearly see them. I mean, you can live down in that valley, and look to the slope next to you and see that. At night, because of the contrast between the dark surface and the white sand below it, on a full moon night, these things lit up. Lit up? Yeah. They appear. It's incredible. I mean, at 2 o'clock in the morning when the moon is really bright, you can see these things. And if you are in the right spot, you will be able to see them. The Nazca lines and these figures were done to be seen at night, not during the day. During the day, it's very hard to see them because there's no contrast. It's at night. If you're on a walk in that desert in the middle of the night, and there's a line, a white line in the middle of a black desert, and there's moon, you can walk forever. Mira tú. The Nazca. These two pots show Nasca and Paracas. The Nazca piece is the one to the right. It's beautiful, Polychromie, fantastic ceramics. This is one of the poorest people in the world. They live in an area that has so little water that water has to be harvested from below the land. I mean, Nazca is one of the regions in Peru today, one of the poorest regions in Peru, because there's not enough water even to drink, let alone to practice agriculture of any kind. And even though they developed many technologies to harvest that water, the amount of liquid that they could get was extremely limited. So how come these people living in one of the most stressed landscapes in the universe could have developed these beautiful ceramics and other things that I'm going to show you? But they were not the first. As usual, when we see something that is great, there's somebody that has done that before. So before the Nazca, we had the Paracas, these guys here. The ceramics is completely different. It's a resin that is painted after the firing of the pots. This is some of the Paracas ceramics, with that very distinct, thick paint. And this is the Nazca beautiful, polychrome ceramics. Here you have a couple of examples. The Paracas are clearly older. They are related with one of the earliest cultural developments in the Central Andes, called the Chavin phenomenon, roughly 1500 years, 2000 years BC. And this is the Nazca. The Nazca was much, much later. Now, these people are famous for their textiles and for their mummies. When they were found in the 20s by Julio Cetello, the father of Peruvian archaeology, he found these caverns, these holes in the ground, with tens of these bundles. And the bundles are called mummies, and they are simply one person that is in the middle, wrapped by many, 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 many layers of incredible textiles. Here you can have an idea of how those burials looked like before. The Nazca are famous also, and the Paracas are famous for their famous, ¿no es cierto?, head modifications. They are humans, by the way. Okay. Now, here is the most important textiles in the universe. This thing here, that is called the Gothenburg textile, is the oldest, the most complex, and the most magnificent piece of textile done, as far as I know, by anybody at any time. It's a Caracas Nasca transition textile that is not only bright and beautiful, but is three-dimensional. And these people were so innovative, I mean, that you see some of the stuff they did, and you immediately recognize things that you won't see until the 20th century with artistic movements there. Look at this. The colors, the combination, this is something absolutely unbelievable. The three-dimensional technique, it's unbelievable. Okay, so Paracas, Nazca, etc. This map shows you the overlap of these two traditions. The dark one is the largest one, ¿no es cierto? Is Nazca, and the light color one is the Paracas. Another view of the Nazca and the Paracas, ¿no es cierto? A procession with the animals, probably moving through the desert, going to the big religious center they had that was called Cahuachi. Some of the ceramics and Cahuachi. And to close this introduction to the Nazca and the Paracas, their famous sunken irrigation systems. Something that you see in other parts of the world. Yemen has things that look very much like this. I mean, the aqueduct goes below the ground, because the water is there. Okay. The research of this society has been done for the last 100 years. The most prominent person there is a German scholar called Maria Reich. That was the first one that actually realized this. Actually, the Nazca lines had been known by the people living in this region forever. They simply didn't give them much importance until we had a mission in 1932 by the US Navy that flew airplanes at low altitude and actually shoot the Nazca lines. And that's where, the research starts. Maria Reich arrives a little later, and this is some of the things that they found. When they found them, they were not as crisp as these. If you can see them, and all these people who go to Nazca to visit these things are actually seeing what Maria Reich broomed in the desert. Every day, started early in the morning until the afternoon with a little ladder, cleaning the Nazca lines. But Maria Reich only broomed what she wanted to broom. You see, it's not everything there is. There's much, much more that she actually saw, or even she wanted to expose, let's say, and that is a little bit of a problem, Not only her, but afterwards there have been many other people using airplanes, low altitude airplanes, like this fellow here, and here you see the technique. Nazca lines can be done by anybody, anywhere in the world. You simply pull out the black stones to the side and expose the white soil below them. Now that's it. Lately, a friend of mine and colleague, a Japanese scholar from the University of Yamagata, Masato Sakai, has been finding more lines, more figures. He was in the news last week because he's using artificial intelligence. Sounds fantastic. Whatever you do, put the word artificial intelligence, because we're going to look very intelligent to do that. I don't know what actually can be contributed to by artificial intelligence other than spotting a white dot. But Masato has been in the desert for now 20 years, there every day, working with the site and finding stuff. Okay, this is how these findings look, this is how you process them, and this is the result you get at the end. It's not that you you suddenly find a figure there in the desert waiting for you to happen. No, it doesn't happen. Because on due time what has happened is that the wind has blown away that white soil that was exposed originally, and thus the Nazca lines, cannot be seen. We have, Johnny Isla has now a method of bringing them back, by actually moving the sand a little bit, exposing the rocks, and we can recover them. This is one of the lines that was found by Masato, and this is, ones we have done that, here. But then we found that there were clusters of lines, A German-Peruvian group of people, Marcus Rendel and Johnny Isla, started working there, around the 90s, and they went up one technological step. They used low-flying airplanes to make big air pictures, and on the basis of them develop the kind of ortho images that they started to use. And through the study of those images, they managed to map the region, and a big challenge started. Let's try to do a catalog of all the Nazca lines. Many universities in the world, I mean more than 10, have been involved in different projects to map the Nazca lines and produce a complete and definitive catalog of Nazca lines, figures, images, etc. It never ends, because once you publish your book, 10 more damn pictures appear somewhere else. So it's a continuous thing. They are going to show up again. Some of the work they did, the analysis. One of the things that started up with these new technological advancements is that you can actually look very carefully at superpositions and the way in which lines superimpose and actually partially destroy previous lines. And that gives you, a horizontal stratigraphy of sorts, in terms of the production of geoglyphs. And that is an interesting thing. In the process, they found that not only are there these huge lines, but there were small figures. First, they found them in rock art, in rock carvings. And then they realized that these rock carvings correspond to the figures that we find. You see? Humans. And this is a really important fact, because the Nazca lines, for some reason, are not about humans. They're about animals and they're about geometric designs, not about humans. And you would expect that the first thing that you will draw if you have the chance is yourself, your father, your mother, your family. But no, this anthropocentric perspective is actually something that happened much earlier during the Paracas period and not during the Nazca time. For some reason, when you transit again from Paracas to Nazca, you lose that human centrality, let's say, in terms of the representation. That is interesting. Why? See, here you can see one of these figures when it's found, and the same figure once Johnny Isla and his team go about bringing it back. Okay? There's some complaint, etc. The complaint is basically because people find these figures to be funny. They look like children things. You see, too simple things. People smiling faces. We find that kind of stuff. But that is basically a modern interpretation of what the Nazca were doing. This is another set before and after. And once you are in the ground there with the people, this team of really dedicated people, you can really find out what's going on. This is another one. Johnny found this in a mountain range. This was photographed in the 1940s by a German scholar and disappeared. And it took Johnny many, many years to find it back. And it was there. It was, maybe 2 kilometers away from his house. But it is that hard, to find this type of things. So, okay. So what do? We decided, Johnny and I, let's try to use this new technique, drones, to see what we can do, not only by taking pictures at lower altitude, by using other things that drones can do. Basically, three-dimensional modeling, okay? Terrain modeling. And maybe we can, with that kind of approach, and the fact that we can not only model three-dimensionally, but also look at it, changing lights, tones, manipulating the images, we can actually get results. So this is typical flight, very dense, very low, with resolutions below 1 centimeter per pixel. We try to get down to 0.5 centimeters. That means that you have to fly at 35, 40 meters above the site. That's all. Which is complicated sometimes. We model the sites. We produce a surface model of the site, and once we have the surface model, we texturize it. And it's in this process that we can start finding stuff. See? So now this is an easy one because we knew this before we knew these figures before we did the process, but actually the idea was to learn that. No? Here you have another issue. Should you take the pictures during the day or at night? Look, this is the color that you see during the day, and this is the color of the Nasca Plateau at night, in the afternoon dusk. But that gives you a very short window of time in terms of taking the pictures. But suddenly, gray turns to brown, and you have more color to work with. So, I mean, here, there are these issues that are absolutely unimportant under other circumstances are critical. This is a region that has some fantastic figures. Look at this. Okay, so here with my students and the drones, and in 2018 we deployed a full-blown project to work there. We went there several times. Actually, it's more intensive than extensive. It's like you work for 4 days, all day, and then you have a truckload of data that you have to go back and process. And that's what we do. It was covered by National Geographic and actually sponsored by National Geographic. And this is with Johnny and some people in the Peruvian army that are also interested in helping us. The idea is go one point beyond that. And can you do this not only to, most people find stuff and then they model it. Find stuff and then they fly drones to get information about what they have found. That is a clear case scenario that we have always in archaeology. A different thing would be if we started by using the drones to survey, to what we call in Spanish prospectar, to find the sites. You see, because in the other one we're limited to documenting stuff that we have found, and in finding in this case is more important actually, is the first stage before documenting. So we worked in this plateau here, divided up into 12 polygons, and then started working in each polygon, taking roughly 2,000 images at the same altitude. So at the end of the day, we had thousands and thousands of images to process. Here you see. And the processing led to the creation of these dot clouds, surface models, etc. These elevation models, digital elevation models, can be important, although the resolution of the elevation models is not as good as the resolution that you get, in let's say in other products, unless you increase the quality of the processing. But that's another possibility of working with these type of sites. The more we work, the technology has increased. Now we can do things that we couldn't do before, like following terrain, and thus keeping the same height difference between the drone and the surface, and that helps a lot. So with this method is that I think that we are starting to change the way we approach these things. This, for instance, is that this is by the way an orca, an anthropomorphic orca or killer whale, found by John Isla. Here in a texturized model, here in a surface model. So actually this proves that we can use only surface models if they are high quality to locate irregularities in the terrain that actually lead to the discovery of things. So that is one of the things that we're trying to do there. Here you can see, with texture, without texture, but you can see the grooves, you can see the depressions. In this other area here, the same thing. Once you start to see these irregularities, as we call them, these things that are odd in the terrain, is that you start focusing. I guess that is what Masato Sakai is doing with artificial intelligence, finding irregularities and then working by processing it. Here, for instance, this was next to a stairway on the site of Palpa, and here you can see a figure that is there, and the figure is a typical figure produced that we see in Paracas textiles. These are the pictures taken at night. This is with no moon, and this is full moon. Unbelievable, Unbelievable because, it can be really, really, really warm in Nasca during the day. You don't want to be out there in the Pampa, enjoying the lines in the middle of a really horrendous. I mean, this is not the sun that you get here. Here it gets warm, but down in South America, between the tropics, the sun can kill you. I mean, it's really intense. So it is likely something that you were going to produce during the day, but actually enjoy during the night. And particularly those that are, as you can see, on the slopes. We also tried to introduce lighting, bring light, put the light on the drones, and it was not much better. I mean, without any light but the moonlight, the resolution we found was fantastic. Now, what are the implications of this? And that's what would this may change in terms of our conception of what these figures were. Okay, so that's the work that we have been doing. And now detection. Once you have found the irregularities, and in this hillside you can see that there are all sorts of lines and things there. Now, try to make out what is there. There's something here. You see that? And there's another thing here. There are lines all over. There's a face here, but this is a face that was done by somebody carelessly trying to restore one of the lines, one of the figures. These are typical Nasca geometric lines, and these are the older Paracas figures that we find in the south. So okay, so this is the beginning of a larger project, because now we have to devise things like how to encode these, how to classify them, and how to have an open-ended classification so that we can add more lines and figures as they come up. So all of these things have to be done, and I think that we are progressing on them. Okay, once you have that, you can actually start using other kind of visualization techniques, to improve contrast and figure out much better what's going on. This is an interesting case in the study that we have been doing, because close to a huge line, this is a Nasca figure, you see, of a hummingbird with an extended beak that ended up in a flower. It must have been beautiful. But then the Nasca themselves came in and made this polygon here, and destroyed the figure below, which tells you that the famous Nasca lines, the figurative lines, were not done at the end of the Nasca period, nor at the beginning, but in the middle. They're sandwiched in the middle. Sometimes they overlap geometric figures, sometimes they happen, they are superimposed by other things. They seem to correspond, most of these beautiful world-known figures seem to correspond to a very short period of time. They are done in a single style, and that is continuous line. If you ask me, I think, personally, that all the famous Nasca lines, not the geometric lines, but the figurative lines, were done by a single person. You see, a single person that had not only the ability, that had a very particular ability, and that is to project an animal, like a hummingbird flying, and transform it to a continuous line. Something we see, and this is a little bit crazy, but I'll say it anyway, something we see among savant artists. You see, something that is done by, you know what savants are, no? These geniuses, naturally born geniuses in music, mathematics, or art. There are some that actually, there's a famous fellow, a British guy, that actually can draw can draw anything by simply looking once at this type of thing. But his ability is not to draw natural, but to transform what he sees into a continuous line. Look in YouTube, and you'll find this amazing thing. Well, these are very similar to that. See? Well, who knows? In any case, next to that, we found a slope, and in that slope we discovered a concentration of lines, several of these figures. See? Some are very clear, some are not. Can you see anything here? Here. See? That's why I'm so curious about the way that Masato Sakai has done his work. because it's nothing, there is nothing that shows you that there's a line there. It's looking at it continuously with different lines. Can you see another figure here?
On the left.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
What about this one? See? So it's only a matter of looking and looking and looking and looking and spending hours and hours. You know? I don't know if you can teach a computer to do that, but then again,
That's deep learning.
deep learning, well, remains to be seen. I'm an old-fashioned human intelligence kind of guy. Okay, so there you go. Now, what is interesting is that all of these figures were projected in this slope. Now, here we have tilted the mountain and projected the images, so you could be standing in the bottom of the valley, looking into the slope, and actually seeing the lines. See? So we have concentrations of lines that are very different than the newer, you know, figures that we find in these sites. You know? Now, here you can see more examples there and up there. They're everywhere. Who did these things and why did they do them? The Paracas and the Nasca, the Paracas were living in a period of time where there was plenty of water in this region. No? Aicha would know better than me. And they actually took advantage of the fact that there are multiple small rivers in the northern region of Palpa. Okay? They developed probably agricultural communities, medium-sized agricultural communities spread through the watershed. So that's the community of people that we have. I mean, density is not very high because there is not much agricultural land here. No? It doesn't look like France. It's like little bits of green and then a lot of dirt. Little bits of green and then a lot of dirt. See? So who did these type of things? No? Here, for instance, we have a group of people represented. No? Here we have another concentration, and in this case, they have even drawn animals, little dogs. No? Using a negative technique, then they have this figure here. And to answer this question, I think that we have to try and understand something hard to understand. Why would you represent you, yourself, your family, your sign? No? They probably clearly recognize who they were. No? And one thing that we're finding is that most of the times, these concentrations of figures were done in roadways, next to places where people would walk through, where you would need to walk through. You cannot walk anywhere in the desert. You have to walk through established, say, pathways. So the figures are concentrated in unavoidable, let's say, corners in those pathways. There we can get not one, not two, but sometimes hundreds of figures altogether. And that to me is something that is similar. And let me jump to that because we're right at the end of time. This is something similar to what you see in any street here in Bordeaux, in France, in Peru, anywhere. Tagging. Not graffiti, but tagging. I think that people are placing themselves in the wall, in this case placing themselves, their families, their liking, you know, in one of these slopes in the middle of the road, let's say, you know, and representing their own identity there. See? They could recognize who they were. We don't. For us, they are signs. As these are signs that I cannot recognize. I cannot read anything out of that. You see? So that this peculiar need, you know, of trying to place yourself in the landscape and to control the landscape, to domesticate the landscape by setting yourself there, is something that is common among societies past and present. And the second thing is that usually in many societies these type of acts of activities are classic bangenep, you know, passage rituals. You see? Something that people do in a certain age as one of those challenges that you have to do. You have to go and portray your family in that mountain there. Yeah? And thus, they are small. They probably were done by small groups of people. I'm imagining young people. There's not a particular style to do this. They're not similar, so it's not the same guy doing the same thing all over the time. They're quite different one from the other in terms of style. And I think that they represent this need to portray yourself in that landscape no, that is so unique. So this is the beginning of a larger process. You know? Here you can see another corner, and I mean, if we didn't have the lights on, you know, you could see that there are many faces popping up here. Many different faces. Just in the middle of a bend in the road where you would have to look at this mountain. So this is a billboard. And I think that this is, my final conclusion is that maybe it is true that the Nazca lines are about a dialogue between men, women, and the gods. These figures that I have shown you that are all there, they are paracas, no, are a dialogue between men or women, no, humans and humans. This is not a dialogue with the gods. This is a dialogue with your neighbors. This is a dialogue with your enemies. No, stop, don't come in because this is ours. This is our territory. You see? And we tend to think that everything that humans do in the past has to do with gods. I don't. I think there are a lot of things that have to do with things that are far more important. Family, children, my animals, my land, my crops. You see? Which are things that can be, of course, you know, intertwined with your religious beliefs and ideologies, but basically what we see here is this representation of the self, of who these people were. So that's what we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I guess there might be some questions, probably in English or in Spanish from the audience there. Ah, c'est pas grave, sinon, sur mon pied, et c'est celui qui envoie. Paula, yes.
At the beginning of the conference, you were saying that you have used drones to record places that have been already found. And with Nasca, you're using them to find new things. So I was wondering if you have ever used them outside of Nasca to find new things as well.
Yes. I have a personal project that is not like an official project. And it's basically going out with a crew of people that I have been working for the last 40 years in the north of Peru. I'm a much archaeologist. My work is in a cemetery, basically. You know, I do funerary archaeology. But I have a very strong team of people that I also work with Sam. And so we go out for, let's say, 5-6 days, and we tag valley, and we use different techniques. You know? We have already flown like 1,500 sites in all of Peru, from Machu Picchu to very small hamlets in the you know? So yes, we do this when we think that there might be something that you don't see, is that when we deploy these surveying techniques. But before you go to the field, what we use a lot is Google Earth. Of course, before we do a survey with Google Earth, we mark polygons, you know? And then another thing that is important is that having flown drones for a while now, there's a difference between flying and flying well. Because when you fly, you have to take account of different things. In Peru, most sites are not on flat surfaces, but they're on slopes. And flying on slopes and recording sites on slopes requires a completely different technique. You know? I have published a number of articles on that, but it's a technical thing that has to be taken into account. Yes.
Thank you. Sabine?
During your presentation, you mentioned that the Paracas line, the Nazca lines, were made for to be seen at night, but that they were probably produced where like the people lived during the day.
Is it possible? Is there any evidence that shows that people were actually living during the day, or that they were making the lines at night, and maybe also living more at night rather than in a very difficult, hot environment of the desert?
There's several things that you have to take into account, you know, and they bring us to the field of ethnography. The day is a cultural concept. You see, peasants, you see, start their days 3 or 4 hours before the sun comes out. They have what we would consider to be a dinner for breakfast. They eat full meal, you know, and then they have 3 hours of work before the sun comes out, where they do some of the work that is more strenuous because the sun, when it comes out, is going to be very, very hard. And then they work through the day, and they go to sleep as soon as the sun goes out. We extend the day, you see? So think of that, to think that maybe the way that we conceive the day, is different than they do. Then here in Europe you have very long, during the summer, very long days. Close to the equator, the difference between day and night is only 1 hour. Winter and summer is 1 hour. So it's very stable, you see. Then I think that you have to take into account that you can be producing the lines and making the lines, during the day, but then the spectacle of the lines is something that happens at night. You can be enjoying the line, or participating in rituals. Now, archaeologically, we cannot tell if those things happen during the day or in the night. People that do field work in the Nasca lines, Masato and the German Peruvian team, they have found shards, fragments of ceramics, sometimes close to the figures, to the lines in Nasca. And that's why they are sure that those lines were produced during the Nasca period. They are very diagnostic polychrome pieces of ceramics. But that stuff does not tell us when were they using the lines, or whether they were practicing a ritual that involved breaking the pots, and that happened during the day and during the night. What we have found, and this is something we did with a team of National Geographic photographers, is that actually we have waited and then take pictures, trying to imitate the visual capacity of the human eye. What would you see if you were exposed to that light, at night? And that's what you have seen. So I think that there's a possibility that we have to reconsider some of the things that we think about it. Now, what would change if these were done to be, say, used ritually at night? A number of things would have changed. One of the multiple explanations for the Nasca lines is that there were roads, because many lines lead to Cahuachi, to that very central ritual place. There are many, many lines that actually are clearly going in the direction of Cahuachi. Now, if you're going to cross the Pampa and walk 20 kilometers, you better walk at night. And if you have a road that is clearly indicating the way, it's easy. I would do that at night. I wouldn't do that during the morning. So I think that there are many, many orientations. Now, this is an issue that archaeology simply have never considered. We never think in what time of the day were things used. So let's try to factorize that.
Thank you so much. More questions, maybe? Actually, I had the same question as Sabine, and actually I was wondering, as you said, it's much easier to walk along the roads when there's no heat. That means during the night.
Yeah.
Of course. And well, that happens in many. And one very little question: the picture that you're showing that you took during the night was no filtering. I mean, it was just thanks to the moonlight, as I said.
Yeah, we were working with a National Geographic photographer,
Yeah.
Pulitzer Prize winner, and we tried to. Remember that perception is and vision is a very complex thing. When you arrive in the mountainside, at the moment that you arrive, you see very little. Once your eyesight gets used to the light conditions, you start seeing things happening. So what we try to do is we try to get to that stage of perception, let's say, and that's when you see that bright. And also, of course, when the moon is
Exactly
in the right place.
Yeah.
That it's not necessarily the zenith, because sometimes, because of the orientation of the mountain, we have more reflection, let's say, at other moment. So it
reminds me of the situation into caves. I'm more used to work into caves, into prehistorical caves in Dordogne next to Gironde. And then when you're there, it is totally black area, And sometimes you find you may have some discoveries because the light from the sun goes into the entrance door, and then you can see a few things. But then afterwards, you have to accommodate the eye to be able to discover things. And and that depends on the light that you can bring into the cave or any action that were made before. So it's a kind of a relationship between this situation of looking at these symbolic drawings made by genius, probably, as you're mentioning, and those who were doing some art into these caves too. That was trying for me to have this kind of parallel thinking. And well, there might be connection, that's what I want to say. Yeah. And one little question, because we are looking at the surface, right? Does it happen that there is something different than taking the stones out or cleaning them up with a brush like the German archaeologists in Approches? Or was it something like bringing some stuff? No, never. No. So it's only taking out to make the road.
The only question is whether they use water to harden the light soil, because otherwise it will blow away real fast. Oh, really fast, 100 years. No? Because this is a very windy area. No? So at the end, you would lose that white soil, and by losing it because of the wind, another layer of dark rocks will appear. Now, the dark rocks are dark when you look at one side. When you turn them around, they tend to be red. So it's oxidation that actually makes them black, you see? So the Nasca knew all of these details, of course. No? And they have a technique. I mean, we have had many instances like these people from the NGO walking into the Nasca lines and stepping their feet, or trucks running through the lines, or motorcycles, or these type of things. No? So the same team of people is in charge of the conservation, and sometimes they have to recuperate. And what they do is basically they get rid of the exposed rocks and then try to even out the white soil. That's exactly how you do it. So that's it. It's not that complex. And I want to insist on this. You see, we have several parts of Peru where we have public parks with the Nasca lines. No? And so you have a drawing of the Nasca line, and you give that drawing to the local gardeners, and they produce the lines. So producing the lines, extrapolate them from an image to the ground, that's no big deal. It's not the production, it's the design. You see? It's the same thing that happens with metallurgy. It's not the craftsmanship that can be, of course, complex. It's the design. I mean, the mastery is in the design. And this is something that we seldom consider in archaeology. We talk about craftsmen. But the craftsmen were probably people that were given a design and do this, and they will do it perfectly well. But the art, the mastery, the masters of the universe, I have an article like that, that was done by the designer. Of course, the designer is many times the producer. But in this case, it's clearly not, because you cannot produce a Nasca line by yourself. You see? So, but somebody has to be able to, I mean, think about it. Pull out a pen one day, look at a figure of a hummingbird, and then try to do a design of a hummingbird so beautiful, so balanced, so in equilibrium, by simply drawing a line around this figure. No paper, no pen, probably you have a piece of, I don't know, leather, and a piece of charcoal, and that's all you have. That's it. Try to do that. And you will clearly realize that it's not an easy thing to do. And that's where the design comes in as really an integral part of it.
Okay, thank you. And that probably jumps to the next talk, because when you're saying that, actually, I'm thinking about these kind of drawings that you mentioned on some of the ceramics that probably show the same kind of geometric line, or even representation of heads or animals or humans, and they were seen on ceramics or on textiles, etc. What are the links? Because I know that many researchers working on the kind of comparative study, and that is probably going to the next talk, I guess. Thank you again, Ms. Jaime Castillo.